In the not-so-distant past, the criminal underworld was dominated by men, but in recent times women have begun to play crucial roles in numerous gangs and criminal organizations, with some even rising to occupy positions of power. The increase in female participation in crime has brought about an inevitable increase in the number of women who are brought into courtrooms to face the consequences of their evil actions. In today's video, I will be drawing back the curtains on the 6 most dangerous women gang members in court, their crimes, and the verdict. Sandra Avila Beltran. Born into a notorious drug family in Baja California, Mexico, Sandra Avila Beltran was destined for a life of crime from the very beginning. Her uncle, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, was not only her family member, but also the godfather and boss of the Mexican drug trade. This familial connection gave Avila a unique insight into the inner workings of the criminal underworld, but some would argue that it was her relationships with well-known drug barons that would shape her destiny. In her youth, Avila had affairs with several influential figures in the drug trade, ranging from top officials in powerful cartels to ex-police commanders turned drug traffickers. These connections opened doors for her and provided her with the opportunity to climb the ranks and solidify her position in the criminal hierarchy. But it was her relationship with Juan Diego Espinosa Ramirez, known as the Tiger, that would ultimately propel her to the forefront of the drug world. The Tiger was a prominent figure in the Colombian Norte del Valle cartel, and his influence and connections became instrumental in Avila's rise to power. Living in Guadalajara, Jalisco, and Hermosillo, Sonora, Avila managed to maintain a high-profile lifestyle while evading the authorities. She was careful, calculated, and always one step ahead until tragedy struck. When Sandra's teenage son was kidnapped, she made a desperate plea to the police for help, but she eventually took matters into her own hands and paid a ransom of $5 million to secure his release. This singular action, though born out of a mother's love, raised suspicions and ultimately led to her arrest. It seemed that even the Queen of the Pacific was not immune to the consequences of her actions. The investigation into Avila's activities spanned 4 years, and she was eventually arrested on September 28, 2007. Charged with organized crime, conspiracy to drug trafficking, possession of illegal weapons, and money laundering, Avila quickly found herself at the center of a high-profile trial that would captivate the world. Despite the gravity of the charges brought against her, Sandra's connections and influence couldn't be ignored. Mexican and U.S. officials recognized her as a crucial link between the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and the Colombian Norte del Valle cartel. Her arrest was seen as a significant blow to the drug trade, as she possessed invaluable knowledge of the inner workings of both cartels. As the courtroom doors swung open, all eyes were on Sandra Avila Beltran, the notorious Queen of the Pacific, once a symbol of power and influence, now facing the justice system. The trial would determine her fate and the extent of her involvement in the drug trade. The prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting Avila's alleged role in money laundering and her connections to the Colombian Norte del Valle cartel. They painted a picture of a woman deeply entrenched in the world of drug trafficking, using her influence and resources to facilitate the smuggling of billions of dollars worth of drugs. Witnesses took the stand, recounting their encounters with Avila and detailing her involvement in the cartel's operations. The courtroom was filled with shocking revelations of private jets, clandestine plastic surgery operations to disguise identities, and murderous shootouts at VIP parties. The prosecution argued that Avila's rise to power had been fueled by massive bribes to Mexican public officials, with allegations of even a $100 million bribe to a Mexican president. Upon hearing the allegations leveled against her, Avila's defense team fought back, challenging the prosecution's claims and attempting to cast doubt on the evidence presented. They argued that the large cash payments made to Avila were merely presents and that her precise role in the cocaine trade was unclear. Avila herself coyly forgot the exact number of bodyguards in her personal detachment, leaving the courtroom intrigued and curious about the extent of her involvement. The courtroom drama took an unexpected turn when, on August 10, 2012, Sandra Avila Beltran was extradited to the United States to face criminal charges. Her involvement with not one but 2 powerful cartels raised eyebrows and fueled speculation about the extent of her influence and connections. Mexican and U.S. officials believed that she played a pivotal role in facilitating the transportation and distribution of drugs between the 2 countries. Avila's extradition to the United States was seen as a significant blow to the drug trade, as it signaled a united front against the cartels. As the trial progressed, some of the charges against Aila were dropped, yet she remained in custody, her fate hanging in the balance. Ultimately, Sandra was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. Needless to say, her time behind bars was far from glamorous. She spent 2 years in isolation, cut off from the outside world. At that time, the once powerful Queen of the Pacific was confined to a prison cell, her freedom stripped away. But even in the darkest of times, Sandra's fighting spirit remained unbroken. She endured the hardships of prison life, determined to survive and eventually regain her freedom. After more than 7 years behind bars, Sandra Avila Beltran was finally released in 2015. Her release marked the end of a chapter in her life, but the impact of her actions and her legacy would forever be etched in the annals of the drug trade. Maria Licciardi. Maria Licciardi, a name that struck fear into the hearts of many, was no ordinary criminal. Born on March 24, 1951, Licciardi's early life set the stage for her eventual rise to become the head of the Licciardi clan and a notable leader of the Camorra. Growing up in Secondigliano, a neighborhood in Naples, Italy, known for its deep-rooted ties to the Camorra, a powerful criminal organization, Licciardi was quickly inducted into a culture where crime and power intertwined. Her father, a well-known local boss, instilled in her a sense of loyalty and respect for the family's criminal heritage. Although Licciardi was born into the upper echelons of the Camorran society, she lived in the shadow of her brothers, father, and husband. It wasn't until after the death of her father and the arrests of her brothers and husband that she took over as leader of the Licciardi clan. Seizing the opportunity brought about by the absence of the men, Licciardi stepped into the spotlight and took control, becoming the first female camerista to hold such a position. Licciardi wasted no time in making her mark. She played a key role in expanding the city's drug trade market, capitalizing on the lucrative opportunities it presented. Licciardi's strategic mind and ruthless determination allowed her to navigate the treacherous underworld, solidifying her reputation as a force to be reckoned with. But drugs weren't the only source of income for Licciardi's empire. She also delved into the skin trade, introducing the clan to this illicit industry. Licciardi's involvement in various criminal enterprises allowed her to amass wealth and power, further cementing her position as a formidable figure within the Camorra. Licciardi's influence extended beyond her criminal activities, but her reign was not without its challenges. News of her identity and her role in the criminal underworld soon reached the authorities, and an investigation into her crimes commenced. As law enforcement closed in on her illicit activities, for years, Licciardi managed to evade capture, operating as a fugitive and staying one step ahead of the authorities. However, her luck eventually ran out when a disagreement over a consignment of heroin led to public outrage and police crackdowns on the Camorra clans. Licciardi's empire began to crumble, and in 2001 she was finally arrested and brought to justice. The courtroom was abuzz with anticipation as Licciardi, once a powerful figure in the criminal underworld, now found herself in the spotlight of justice. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously documenting her involvement in the drug trade and prostitution rings. Witnesses took the stand, testifying against Licciardi and painting a vivid picture of her role in the criminal activities that had plagued the city. The prosecution spared no detail, leaving no doubt in the minds of the jury about Licciardi's culpability. Throughout the trial, Licciardi maintained her composure, her steely gaze fixed on the proceedings. Her defense team fought tooth and nail, attempting to poke holes in the prosecution's case. But the weight of the evidence proved insurmountable, and Licciardi's fate seemed sealed. The courtroom drama unfolded before the eyes of the media and the public, who were captivated by the high-stakes nature of the trial. Licciardi, once a feared and respected figure, now faced the consequences of her actions. As the trial reached its climax, the jury deliberated, their decision carrying the weight of justice. And when the verdict was finally announced, it sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Maria Licciardi, the once untouchable crime boss, was found guilty. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, from relief to satisfaction, as justice was served. Licciardi's conviction marked a significant turning point in her criminal career. The woman who had once held immense power and influence was now destined for a different kind of life behind bars. But Licciardi's story didn't end there. After serving her sentence, she was released in 2009, much to the shock and dismay of those who had hoped to see her locked away forever. Licciardi's release sparked controversy and reignited fears of a resurgence of criminal activity under her leadership. Freed from the confines of prison, Licciardi wasted no time in reclaiming her position of power. In her day, she was known for her practicality, charm, and exceptional intelligence, so it was not much of a surprise that she quickly resumed her role as the head of the Lardi Camorra clan. Under her command, the clan engaged in various criminal enterprises, including extortion rackets that preyed upon the vulnerable. Lardi's return to the criminal world simply served as proof that not all criminals could be reformed. This time around, law enforcement agencies were determined to bring her to justice once and for all. The hunt for Lardi intensified as authorities sought to dismantle her criminal empire. In 2021, the moment they had been waiting for arrived. Lardi was arrested once again, marking a significant development in the ongoing battle against organized crime. The news of Lardi's arrest reverberated through the criminal underworld as it became clear that her thirst for power and control was far from quenched. The arrest served as a stark reminder that even the most cunning and elusive criminals could not evade justice forever. Lardi's subsequent trial promised to be another spectacle, as the prosecution aimed to present a compelling case against her. As the trial began, the courtroom was once again filled with tension and anticipation. The prosecution meticulously laid out their case, presenting evidence of Lardi's involvement in extortion rackets and other criminal activities. Lardi's defense team fought tirelessly, attempting to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, but the weight of the evidence and the public sentiment seemed to be against her. The trial unfolded, captivating the media and the public with its high-stakes drama. Lardi once again found herself at the center of attention, her fate hanging in the balance. Once again, Lardi was found guilty, and in 2023, at the age of 71, she was sentenced to almost 13 years in prison. Rosetta Kudo. Rosetta Kudo, born on January 1, 1937 in Ottaviano near Naples, had a life that would become intertwined with the dark underbelly of organized crime. As the sister of Raffaele Kudo, the notorious boss of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata, NCO, Rosetta would eventually play a pivotal role in the organization's operations. While her brother spent much of his time behind bars, it was Rosetta who took charge of the day-to-day running of the NCO. Her nickname, Ice Eyes, perfectly captured her steely determination and unwavering loyalty to her brother's criminal empire. Despite her unassuming appearance as a gray-haired, pious-looking woman, Rosetta was a force to be reckoned with. Living with her mother and tending to her roses, Rosetta kept a low profile in Ottaviano. But behind closed doors, she was the power behind her brother for over 15 years. From her headquarters at the Castello Mediceo, a grand 16th-century palace with 365 rooms, Rosetta passed on her brother's orders from jail and cultivated his devoted followers outside. Despite being brilliant with figures, Rosetta Kudo was not just a figurehead. She negotiated with South American cocaine barons, narrowly escaping a failed attempt to blow up police headquarters. Her influence even extended to the world of cinema, as she was glamorized in the film Il Camorrista. But it wasn't just about power and influence for Rosetta. She had a complicated love-hate relationship with her brother. According to their lawyer, Paolo Trofino, they often had heated arguments, with Rosetta believing that Raffaele talked too much and wishing he wouldn't give interviews. Rosetta Kudo's role in the NCO was not just limited to managing operations. She participated in high-level meetings with representatives of the Sicilian Mafia and Camorra clans, aiming to bring an end to the violent war between the NCO and their rivals, the Nuova Familia. Alongside Kudo's right-hand man, Vincenzo Casillo, she sought to establish a fragile peace. However, in October 1981, the police raided her stronghold at the Castello Mediceo while she was presiding over a meeting of the NCO. In a daring escape, Kudo managed to slip away under a rug in a car driven past checkpoints by a neighborhood priest. This marked the beginning of her life as a fugitive. Following the incident, Kudo was not seen in public for over 10 years. In this time, she managed to evade capture by hiding in various locations around the world. Detectives searched for her tirelessly, believing she had spent extended periods in Brazil and Venezuela before recently returning to Italy. In February 1993, the global manhunt finally came to an end when she gave herself up after police found her hideout. Kudo appeared at the entrance saying, "I am tired of being a fugitive." Kudo's arrest not only marked the end of her life on the run, but also provided a significant breakthrough for law enforcement. With her capture, authorities gained valuable insights into the inner workings of the NCO and its criminal activities. Kudo's arrest came just weeks after the capture of Salvatore Todorina, the alleged boss of bosses of the Sicilian-based Cosa Nostra. These high-profile arrests showcased the determination of authorities to dismantle these powerful criminal networks. Although prosecutors alleged she had been running her brother's organization, Kudo maintained her innocence. Somehow, She persuaded the authorities she was harmless, and her frumpy image definitely helped. Her brother Raffaele Kudo also played his part by maintaining that Rosetta knew nothing of his criminal activities and did only what he asked. In a statement he said, "Rosetta has never been a camarista. She only listened to me and sent me a few suitcases of money to prisoners like I told her to." One reason Raphael found it easy to convince the authorities that his sister was not a key player in the NCO was because it was clear to many that he had always wanted to maintain a male-only organization based on principles such as criminal fraternity, and so could never be seen giving a role to a woman. Many important members of the organization did not believe that she held an important role because she was a woman. For instance, former NCO Lieutenant and Pentito Pasquale Barra argued, saying, "What has Rosa Cutolo got to do with it? What have women got to do with the Camorra?" However, according to prosecutor Antonio Laudati, who questioned Cutolo many times, his sister was the true force behind the NCO. Her brother has always been under the power of her forceful personality. He's been in prison for 30 years. During that time, she became director of the Nuova Camorra Organizzata in her own right. Eventually, Rosetta was acquitted of murder charges, but she had already been sentenced in absentia for her involvement in organized crime. The story of Rosetta Kudo highlights the complexities of power, loyalty, and gender dynamics within the criminal underworld. Her role as a woman leading a male-dominated organization challenged traditional notions, and her influence over the NCO was undeniable. Maria Chatal Leon. Maria Chatal Leon, a name that strikes fear into the hearts of many, was not just an ordinary mother of 13 children. Behind her seemingly ordinary facade, she ruled over a criminal empire that spanned across borders and involved drug dealing, human trafficking, and murder. Her power extended far beyond the confines of her neighborhood, as she had connections to a notorious human smuggling ring that operated along the Mexican border. Maria's criminal enterprise was like a spider's web, intricately woven and spanning from north to south. She sat at the center, orchestrating the movement of drugs and people with precision and cunning. Law enforcement officials were well aware of her activities, but for decades, she seemed untouchable, eluding capture and dismantling attempts. Her connections to the Mexican Mafia, a militant revolutionary group, only added to her power and influence. Backed by this formidable organization, Maria's criminal empire thrived, with the Mexican Mafia providing protection and resources to further her illicit operations. The collaboration between gang members and human smugglers was a key aspect of Maria's empire. Gang members under her command worked closely with the smugglers, ensuring the safe passage of individuals across the border. These individuals, desperate to escape their circumstances, often found themselves indebted to the coyotes and were forced into a life of drug dealing to repay their debts. The extent of Maria's criminal activities was shocking, as she controlled a vast network of drug dealers and enforcers. Her reach extended not only into the United States, but also into Mexico, where she had established connections with powerful cartels. This allowed her to traffic drugs across borders, evading law enforcement and reaping immense profits. But Maria's criminal empire was not built overnight. It was the result of years of careful planning, strategic alliances, and ruthless tactics. She had a reputation for eliminating anyone who posed a threat to her power, leaving a trail of bodies in her wake. Law enforcement agencies, particularly the Los Angeles Police Department, had long been determined to dismantle Maria's empire and bring her to justice. However, their efforts were met with resistance at every turn. Maria's stronghold, a compound that served as her headquarters, was fortified with surveillance cameras and an extensive weapons stash. The property, which was said to house a shrine dedicated to the patron saint of narco-trafficking, Jesus Malverde, was for all intents and purposes a fortress that seemed impenetrable. But as the saying goes, every empire has its downfall. The wild gun battle that erupted in Los Angeles changed the course of Maria's life forever. It was during this violent clash that her son, Danny Clever Leon, lost his life in the shootout with the police. The loss of her son was a devastating blow, but it also marked the beginning of the end for Maria. In the aftermath of the gun battle, Maria found herself stuck in Mexicali, a border town, unable to cross into the United States legally. Determined to attend her son's funeral, she turned to her criminal network for help. One of her sons reached out to Eduardo Alvarez Marquez, the reputed mastermind behind a human smuggling ring, in a desperate attempt to get Maria back in time for the funeral services. Unbeknownst to Maria and her son, federal authorities were listening in on their conversation. The phone call became a crucial piece of evidence in a wide-ranging investigation that aimed to dismantle Maria's criminal empire once and for all. Alvarez Marquez, who was charged with smuggling, became a key target in the case against Maria. Eventually, the law caught up with Maria, and she was apprehended. Maria Leon's trial was a highly anticipated event, drawing attention from both the media and the public. The evidence presented by the prosecution painted a vivid picture of her involvement in drug dealing, human trafficking, and murder. Witnesses testified to her role as the head of a massive criminal enterprise with connections to the Mexican mafia. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including wiretapped conversations, surveillance footage, and testimonies from former gang members. These pieces of evidence revealed the extent of Maria's criminal activities and her control over the drug and human trafficking operations. The defense, on the other hand, sought to challenge the credibility of the witnesses and the admissibility of the evidence. They argued that Maria was a victim of circumstance, forced into a life of crime due to her difficult circumstances and the influence of others. After weeks of intense courtroom drama, the jury finally reached a verdict. Maria Chatal was found guilty on multiple charges, including drug trafficking, human smuggling, and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge handed down a sentence that reflected the severity of her crimes. Maria Leon was sentenced to 8 years in a federal prison, where she would serve time for her crimes. This marked a significant downfall for the once powerful gang leader, as she faced the consequences of her actions. Many others in her gang pleaded guilty and received lesser sentences. The compound that once served as her stronghold was torn down, erasing any physical remnants of her reign. Today, the warlike sounds that once echoed through the neighborhood have faded away. Maria Chatal, the matriarch who once ruled with an iron fist, is now confined behind bars. Her criminal empire, once feared and powerful, is nothing more than a memory. The story of Maria Chatal serves as a reminder of the shocking depths to which some individuals can sink. It is a cautionary tale of the consequences that await those who choose a life of crime and violence. Griselda Blanco. Griselda Blanco, the notorious Black Widow or cocaine godmother, had a life that was as shocking as it was captivating. Born on February 14, 1943 in Cartagena, Colombia, Blanco's early years were marked by poverty and hardship. Growing up in a country plagued by violence and corruption, she learned early on that survival meant taking matters into her own hands. Blanco's journey to becoming one of the most powerful figures in the drug trade began when she made the fateful decision to illegally immigrate to the United States in 1964. Seeking a better life and the promise of opportunity, she set her sights on the bustling city of New York. Arriving in Queens, New York, Blanco wasted no time in establishing herself in the criminal underworld. With her fierce determination and entrepreneurial spirit, she quickly built a sizable cocaine business. It was during this time that she earned the nickname Cocaine Godmother for her ruthless tactics and her dominance in the drug trade. Blanco's rise to power was not without its challenges. She faced constant threats from rival gangs and law enforcement agencies who were determined to bring her down. But Blanco was a force to be reckoned with, and she was not one to back down easily. As her empire grew, Blanco's influence extended beyond New York. She expanded her operations to Miami, Florida, where she became a central figure in the Miami drug war, otherwise known as the Cocaine Cowboy Wars. This period was marked by intense violence and bloodshed, as rival drug cartels fought for control of the lucrative cocaine trade. Blanco's involvement in the drug trade brought her immense wealth and power, but it also came at a great cost. The streets of Miami became a battleground, with countless lives lost in the crossfire. Blanco's ruthless reputation earned her both fear and respect, but it also made her a prime target for law enforcement. In 1975, Blanco's criminal activities caught up with her when she was indicted on federal drug conspiracy charges. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, she made the decision to flee to Colombia, her home country. It was a daring escape that would allow her to evade capture and continue her reign as the cocaine godmother. But Blanco's time in Colombia would be short-lived. The lure of the United States and the power she had built there proved too strong to resist. In the late 1970s, she returned to Miami, settling back into the city that had become synonymous with her name. Blanco's return to Miami marked a turning point in her life. The city was in the midst of a drug-related violence epidemic, and she found herself at the center of it all. The Miami drug war raged on, with rival cartels vying for control of the lucrative cocaine trade. Blanco's presence only added fuel to the fire as she fought to protect her empire and maintain her grip on power. In the midst of all these, the law was closing in on Blanco. In 1985, she was arrested and charged with conspiring to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. The arrest and subsequent trial were devastating blows to the cocaine godmother, who had spent years evading capture and building her criminal empire. After a highly publicized trial, Blanco was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. It was a significant fall from grace for a woman who had once been one of the most powerful figures in the drug trade, but Blanco's story was far from over. While serving her sentence, Blanco faced additional charges. This time, she was accused of 3 counts of first-degree murder in Florida. The charges were a grim reminder of the violence that had defined her life and her empire. Blanco ultimately pleaded guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison. Blanco's time behind bars was not without its challenges. In 2002, she suffered a heart attack while in prison, a stark reminder of the toll her criminal activities had taken on her health. Despite her declining health, Blanco was released in 2004, having served a significant portion of her sentence. After being released, Blanco went to her home country determined to enjoy her freedom and live out her remaining years in peace. But Blanco's freedom would be short-lived. In 2012, she was shot dead in Medellin, Colombia at the age of 69. It was a violent end to a life marked by violence and power. The cocaine godmother had met her match, and her reign had come to an abrupt and tragic end. Griselda Blanco's life was a testament to the shocking and sensational world of the drug trade. From her early years in poverty-stricken Colombia to her rise as the cocaine godmother in the United States, her story captivated the public and continues to intrigue to this day. Blanco's legacy lives on, immortalized in multiple documentaries, films, and songs that seek to unravel the enigma of the Black Widow. Judy Moran. Judy Moran's journey into the dark world of crime began long before she became the notorious matriarch of the Moran criminal family. Born as Judith Marianne Brooks on December 18, 1944 in Victoria, Australia, she grew up in the vibrant neighborhood of Carlton. Her mother was a dancer, and it seemed that Judy inherited her love for the spotlight. In 1963, at the age of 19, Judy married Leslie John Johnny Cole. However, their marriage was cut short when Johnny was tragically shot dead in a Sydney drug-related gangland conflict in 1982. Together, they had a son named Mark, who was born in 1964. Little did Judy know that her life would be marred by further tragedy and criminal involvement. After her first husband's death, Judy began a relationship with Louis Moran in 1966. They had a son named Jason Moran in 1967. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Judy and Louis stayed together for many years, even as their lives became entangled in the criminal underworld. Louis Moran, Judy's de facto husband, was involved in various criminal activities, including being an SP bookmaker, pickpocket, and thief. He became a prominent figure in the Melbourne gangland scene, especially after their sons, Mark and Jason, followed in his footsteps. Mark, an unemployed pastry chef, owned a luxurious $1.3 million home before he was brutally murdered in June 2000. Jason, who had a criminal record and no regular job, was driving a silver BMW before he too was shot dead in June 2003. Judy's ignorance or willful blindness to the criminal activities of the men in her life is a subject of debate. Despite her intelligence, she seemed content to remain in the shadows, unaware or uninterested in the details of their illicit ventures. It was this ignorance that would ultimately lead to her downfall. As the Moran family's criminal activities escalated, so did the tensions within the family. Judy and Louis separated in 1995, adding another layer of complexity to their already complicated lives. The separation marked the beginning of a bitter feud between Judy and her brother-in-law Desmond Moran, commonly known as Tuppence. De Moran, Louis's younger brother, was a working-class man who preferred a quiet life. He had little in common with Judy, except for their mutual loathing. While Des was well-liked within the old-school Moran circles, Judy was detested. The animosity between them deepened when Des expressed his fear that his assets would be seized by the police, leading to a bitter feud over money and inheritance. The Moran family's criminal empire was built on a foundation of drugs, particularly the manufacture and distribution of amphetamines and ecstasy. At one point, Des joined the family business, but he eventually drifted away around 2004, less ambitious and more cautious than his brother Louis. The collapse of Judy's relationship with Louis after years of violence, infidelity, and bitterness resulted in Louis reluctantly giving her sole ownership of their Ascot Vale house. In a will signed in February 2004, Louis bequeathed the house to Judy. However, after Louis was murdered a month later, rumors began to circulate that he had left behind a hidden fortune. Judy believed that Des had been secretly enjoying the spoils of Louis's hidden assets. On the other hand, Des suspected that those close to Judy had conducted a looting run shortly after Louis's murder. The tension between them grew as they both searched for answers and hidden wealth. Des was convinced that Louis had hidden a stash of pseudoephedrine worth $200,000, and he believed it had been stolen shortly after Louis's death. He suspected Jason's sister-in-law, Suzanne Kane, and her husband, Jeff Armour, of being the culprits. Des even made it known that he was aware of their alleged theft, a move that would have far-reaching consequences. The feud between Judy and Des intensified when Des indicated his intention to change his will, cutting out Judy's grandchildren. This revelation left Judy livid and desperate to protect her interests. She was determined to secure her share of the family fortune, even if it meant resorting to extreme measures. In her desperation, Judy borrowed $400,000 using her only asset, the family home, as collateral. The loan was approved on May 13th, and within a week she had already spent almost half of it on 3 new cars and withdrawn $50,000 in cash. Judy had mortgaged her future, placing all her hopes on the sale of her house to repay the loan and secure her financial stability. Driven by greed and hatred, Judy devised a plan to eliminate Des before he could change his will. She enlisted the help of a gullible accomplice, Michael Ferrugia, to carry out the sinister act. The details of their plot and the shocking events that unfolded would send shockwaves through the criminal underworld and captivate the nation. Little did Judy Moran know that her actions would lead her down a path of destruction, ultimately culminating in a high-profile trial that would expose the dark underbelly of Melbourne's gangland killings. The courtroom would become the stage where Judy's fate would be decided, and the shocking truth behind her involvement in De Moran's murder would be revealed. Ultimately, Judy Moran was sentenced to 26 years in jail, with a non-parole period of 21 years, a punishment that would forever change her life. This true crime tale serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from a life steeped in violence and criminality. The legacy of the Moran family's criminal empire and the impact it had on their lives and the lives of those around them will forever be etched in Melbourne's history. The fact that these dangerous women were charged and convicted for their crimes simply goes to show that no one is above the law. Check out this next video to learn more about the punishment that is meted out to dangerous criminals.